There is a moment, a fraction of a second, when you open your eyes in a strange room and do not yet know where you are. Before the room resolves into familiar or unfamiliar, before you know whether you are safe or in danger, before you remember your name or your situation, something is happening. You are having an experience. But the categories that normally structure experience have not yet arrived. You exist, for an instant, in pure, unmediated contact with what is. William James spent the last decade of his life trying to describe this moment philosophically, and what he came up with is one of the most daring and profound ideas in the history of Western thought. He called it pure experience, and he made it the cornerstone of his radical empiricism. The philosophical context matters here. James was writing at a time when Western philosophy was deeply divided between two camps. Materialists claimed that only physical matter is real, that consciousness is either an illusion or a mere byproduct of brain activity. Idealists claimed the opposite, that only consciousness is ultimately real, and that matter is somehow a construct of mind. James thought both sides had missed something fundamental, and he proposed a radical alternative. Pure experience, he argued, is the stuff that the universe is made of, but it is neither material nor mental in the ordinary sense. It is pre-categorical, prior to the distinction between subject and object, knower and known. The split into mind and matter is something that happens within experience, not something that exists before it. Experience is the original fact. Everything else, including the distinction between a knowing mind and a known world, is a secondary abstraction constructed out of experience. This sounds abstract, but consider what it means concretely. When you see a red apple, ordinary philosophy asks, is the redness in the apple or in your mind? James says this is the wrong question. The redness is in the experience of seeing. The apple and the perceiver are both abstractions carved out of a more fundamental reality that is neither apple alone nor perceiver alone, but the experiencing event itself. James drew explicitly on what he knew of Buddhist philosophy and Vedantic thought, which had been making similar points for millennia. The radical empiricist tradition in the East, particularly in Zen and Advaita Vedanta, also insists that the division between subject and experience, between self and world, is a conceptual overlay on something more primary. James recognized this convergence and found it significant, though he was careful to develop his version on purely empirical and philosophical grounds rather than mystical ones. The psychological implications are profound. If pure experience precedes the categories of self and world, then our ordinary sense of being a separate self, enclosed in a skin and looking out at an external reality, is not a fundamental metaphysical fact. It is a cognitive construction, tremendously useful, almost always necessary, but not the last word on what we are or where we end and the world begins. This is precisely what advanced meditators report, that sustained contemplative practice can, temporarily, dissolve the apparent rigidity of the self-world boundary and reveal something more fluid beneath it. James was not advocating for the elimination of categories. He was too pragmatic for that. Categories are tools. The concept of self is one of the most useful tools consciousness has ever developed. The concept of an external world is indispensable for navigating reality. But these are tools, not ultimate truths. And the error James spent his career combating, is mistaking the map for the territory, the concept for the experience it was built to organize. In contemporary neuroscience and philosophy of mind, James's pure experience is experiencing a remarkable revival. Philosophers like Thomas Metzinger have argued that the sense of self is a construction, a model the brain makes of itself. Neuroscientists studying the default mode network have found that the sense of being a separate, continuous self correlates with specific neural activity patterns that can be disrupted by meditation, by psychedelics, by certain neurological conditions, revealing experimental states that do not have the usual self versus world structure. For ordinary life, the concept of pure experience offers something valuable, a reminder that reality is richer than our categories of it, that the experience of seeing a sunset or hearing music or feeling grief is not exhausted by any description or explanation we can give, that there is always more in experience than what our concepts can capture, and that attending to experience directly, pausing the relentless categorizing, evaluating, narrating mind, can open access to dimensions of reality that are always there but rarely noticed. James believed that philosophy, at its best, is not about abstract argument. It is about training the attention to see more clearly. Pure experience is not a theory about consciousness. It is a pointer towards something you can discover for yourself, right now, if you look carefully enough at what is happening before your mind interprets it. This is among the deepest and most fascinating corners of James's thought. Subscribe to the Psychology of William James and keep exploring the frontiers of what mind and reality actually are.